Hey there, welcome to a brand new episode of Show Me the Crypto. This week we chat with Sicco Naets, who is the Director of Technical Operations with Moonbeam Foundation, about all things, not just Moonbeam, but Polkadot as well. And in one point, Sicco describes Moonbeam as the gateway to Polkadot. Very interesting episode. Ulf, what were your thoughts?
It was so great to dive into a subject matter around the Polkadot ecosystem because we really haven't had the chance to cover that in depth yet. And Sicco did such a great job of breaking down both Polkadot and everything Moonbeam in a way that if you're not super technically savvy like Wade and I, it was really easy to understand the value that Moonbeam brings to Polkadot and to other blockchains as well. So there's lots to learn on that side. We also really got into Web3 gaming and what blockchain technology can bring to gaming in the future, as well as what's currently being worked on. And Sicco had some amazing ideas, I think, in regards to how it can be utilized. So if you're into gaming and blockchain, I think you'll find that section of the interview really interesting as well.
Yeah, to Ulf's point, definitely stick around to the end of this interview where we get into all things gaming. And this is a subject we've talked about on this podcast before, but Sicco brought some fresh ideas that we have never heard. And so we think you're going to love it. A lot of value on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto.
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name is Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends from Canada who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews with some of the most intelligent and influential people in the blockchain space help deliver you with value. And on this episode, we're joined by Sicco Naets, Director of Technical Operations with Moonbeam Foundation. Sicco is an experienced software development leader with a background in tech, politics, history, and sociology. His technical expertise includes blockchain, distributed microservices architecture, messaging middleware, and cloud deployments. Moonbeam is a smart contract platform for a cross-chain connected application that unites functionality from Ethereum, Polkadot, and beyond. Sicco, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Thanks, Wade and Ulf. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to learn more about all things Moonbeam. But before we get there, let's start with your own career background. And for our audience, they know Ulf and I are not technical people, but looking at some of the things I just mentioned there in your career, I mean, we've got terms like microservices architecture, messaging middleware, cloud deployments. Can you unpack some of that and explain to our audience what your career background's all about?
Sure. I had maybe a little bit of an unusual path to crypto. My background is actually, when I went to university, I actually wanted to be a journalist. So my degree is in political social science, which I don't think you'll find many people in crypto with that kind of background. And then, I did actually, early on did an internship as a TV reporter, realized that wasn't for me. I sort of, a little bit naive understanding what that was. And then, basically, I'm a little older. I'm 49, so started my career during the height of the dot-com boom. Like so many other people, landed in tech, even though I didn't have a technical background. And turned on, I kind of had a knack for programming, and I quite enjoyed it. And so I went, sort of started as a developer, senior developer, system architect. Did that for about 10 years, and then sort of made a transition to management. So I have led, larger engineering teams at sort of more traditional enterprise corporations. But I always remained sort of fairly technical, so kind of on the architecture side. So, I used to work for Fuse, which was an American startup, and they built a, something similar to Zoom, actually, sort of an integrated messaging system with video and so forth. And and so a lot of my job has been in sort of, the design and operation and overseeing of those sort of kind of backend systems. I came to crypto late. I've been in crypto since, I guess, sort of like mid 2021. I think what attracted me a little bit was this kind of background in, politics and sociology, but also, my own management experience. I mean, there is this thing that happens, right? When corporations get larger, like, you get a certain amount of bureaucracy and like red tape and so forth that gets introduced, which I was always personally very frustrated with. And so, the idea of this sort of decentralized governance model was quite appealing to me. Kind of, I don't know, I think the proof is still a little bit out there to see whether it actually works. But I was like, I don't see anybody else kind of trying kind of a new model, and so I found that quite fascinating. Basically, this idea that you could deliver functionality the way that a corporation does without actually having a company with sort of middle management and upper management and so forth. So yeah, so that's a little bit how I got there. So yeah.
Well, you and I share the journalism background and probably the large number of people who study journalism but no longer are doing a job related to the journalism field. Another thing that caught my attention, Sicco, was that one of your interests is collectible card games. So what are some of these games that you're into, and where did that passion stem from?
So I don't know if you can see, I have like a whole collection of like role-playing game books back there. So
nice.
So I have been a lifelong Dungeons and Dragons nerd since like age 12 or something like this. Not just Dungeons and Dragons, but pretty much any role-playing game you can imagine. Pathfinder, Call of Cthulhu, Cyberpunk, Shadowrun, this kind of thing. And I think, once you get into that, political card trading games is kind of a logical follow-over. I actually have I have a friend who's been he's been working in the gaming industry for I think 30 years. He was actually a vice president of marketing for Activision, and he had connections at Wizards of the Coast, and so I was like an early alpha tester for Magic the Gathering, and I had way back when I had a Black Lotus Royal Assassin deck. So yeah, so I was it's like I've given all those cards away, for which I will always like kick myself because not at the time understanding kind of the long-term value. But yeah, so I've always had a fascination with anything role playing, Magic, Netrunner. I mean, I played a whole bunch of like different role playing card trading games and role playing games. So, yeah.
Do you play video games as well? I was wondering what your take on, for someone who played the Cyberpunk role playing game to then see that universe get expanded into Cyberpunk 2077. What your thoughts are? Yeah,
it was pretty interesting. I mean, first of all, I mean, it's amazing to see it kind of come to life. I think CD Projekt Red did a really good job of capturing kind of the vibe of the game and so forth. I also think it was a very smart move because I think, when you're building a game, there is, I mean, everybody always talks about the technology side, but like, sort of the IP, right? Like the intellectual property behind it and the setting is like, it's pretty important to create like a believable universe. And so, building that from scratch, I think is pretty challenging. I think it was a pretty smart move to go find, this, by this point, rather obscure role-playing game that only a few kind of old people like me remembered. And then dusting it off and essentially having a ready-made world, and also kind of having an instant fan base, because there are enough people that had nostalgia about the game and who could then sort of spread by word of mouth. So I think it was fantastic, basically. So yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, you're in Canada and we're in Canada, and I was curious what your take is on the crypto scene in Canada and what Canadians have contributed to the space.
That's a good question. I actually don't really have a good answer to that. I would say that I'm not that familiar with the crypto scene in Canada. I think, most of my focus has been kind of international, but I did go to like ETH Toronto last year, and it was kind of interesting. Like, I think, there was like, I think there is a tremendous interest, basically, right? I think one of the stats I heard there that was like something like 1 in 6 Canadians has at least at some point like owned crypto. So I think that's been, I think that was a little bit of an eye opener to me. I think a little bit similar to the US. I think, a little bit of like, lack of clarity from a regulatory point of view. And so I think that's probably made adoption like a little bit more challenging here. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm not that plugged into the Canadian scene, basically. So yeah.
Well, let's dive into all things Moonbeam, but probably before we get into that, I think a smart thing is to take a step back and to understand Polkadot for some of our audience who may not be overly familiar. So how would you explain just the Polkadot ecosystem for someone who maybe has never really dug into it?
Yeah. So I think, the Polkadot ecosystem, I mean, it sort of stems a little bit, I think it stems from a specific belief about crypto, right? That, there is essentially not one chain that's going to capture the entire crypto market. Now, if you don't believe in that, then Polkadot, is probably less attractive to you. But I think
recording.
Yeah.
Sorry, what's that?
I said,
stop this recording.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah. So I think there's the idea that fundamentally the only way to really scale crypto is to have multiple chains and to even allow chains to like specialize, right? So, and once you accept that that's probably a likely outcome, then you start to realize that chains need to like communicate with one another, and so and there are. Outside Polkadot, there are ways to do that via bridging and so forth, but via crypto bridges, but those typically do have problems. Like they're not necessarily the most user-friendly thing to use. They do carry quite a bit of significant security risk. If you look over the last couple of years, most of the major hacks have been at some bridge layer or another. And so what Polkadot provides is kind of this framework that allows for the development of multiple sort of parallel chains, which Polkadot calls parachains, but which are all backed by the same underlying, by like one master chain, essentially like a relay chain. And so via that relay chain, you can then communicate with one another in a secured way, where the communication protocol is actually secured by the underlying relay chain. It does provide like additional benefits to that. So for example, there's forkless upgrades, right? So on Ethereum or on blockchain or on Bitcoin or some of the larger chains, if you really want to change how the protocol works, you have to do a hard fork. Essentially, sort of fork the code base. Everybody deploys these new nodes, and then you get everybody to agree to come over. In Polkadot, that is managed natively by the underlying protocol. So Moonbeam has done north of 20 upgrades over the last 2 years. None of which required people to sort of redeploy clients or essentially like fork a new network. And it also has like built-in governance and so forth. So it's sort of like take what is good in crypto and then figure out where the areas are to like improve it and provide kind of like an architectural base so that you can build upon that basically, right? So and then within Polkadot there are these parachains. People get these sort of slots on the underlying relay chain, which they can win via an auction, and then so this delivers this like ecosystem basically. So yeah.
And so and thank you for that, by the way. That then opens up the conversation to Moonbeam. So what is Moonbeam, and why was Moonbeam built as a parachain on the Polkadot ecosystem, and how does that all work?
Right. So Moonbeam at the core, I think, so Polkadot is built on Substrate, which is a little bit of a less known sort of blockchain technology. I think, the most market dominant technology that blockchains are built on is EVM, right? Is Ethereum compatibility. And so Moonbeam brings like EVM compatibility to Polkadot. So you can take a smart contract or a blockchain application that was developed for Ethereum and deploy it on Moonbeam with zero alterations. Like it'll just take the code, deploy it, it'll just work. But we're not the only EVM compatible chain. In fact, we're not even the only EVM compatible parachain. I think our specific kind of vision is what we call connected contracts. So we have heavily bought into this vision of the whole purpose of the existence of Moonbeam is that we've bought into this vision of there's not going to be one chain to rule them all, and that there is this multi-chain future, and that when you start thinking about that brings challenges with it, right? So for starters, how do you communicate? Like what becomes like the center of your operations? One belief we have is that we have this paradigm called connected contracts. So we have this belief that, you know, dApps or crypto applications will eventually in their trajectory, in their growth curve, hit this point where they realize that they have to go multi-chain. I mean, you know, if you think about it, you build a game or you build a DeFi protocol, you know, if you start building that, you're going to deploy it on one specific chain because, you know, you like the technology or like the community or whatever. But at some point you will have maxed out, you know, the people that are interested in what you're building. And then the most logical step to do that is to say, well, okay, if what I built worked well on say Polygon, let me take that thing and then also deploy it on Binance chains, right? Or on Ethereum or Solana or one of these other chains. That brings some challenges with it though. So from a user experience point of view, if you have the same application deployed on multiple chains, like I can't now easily see all of my assets in one place, right? So if I have a bunch of NFTs and I've got NFTs on Polygon and I've got NFTs on Solana, I probably need two different wallets. I can't see them all at the same time. I can't easily trade them. It creates a lot of problems for the teams that are deploying it as well. I mean, they need to essentially have multiple deployments of their code. They have to fork it. If the blockchain that they're going after is written in a different language, I mean, that's go hire a whole bunch of new developers and rework the code. Not all the functionality may work. So your deployment on chain A may not be quite the same as the deployment on chain B. How do you explain that to your community and so forth? So that all, like, you know, we think that's a natural evolution that teams, if they are successful, will eventually get to. And so we want to solve for that, right? So this connected contract vision is the idea that you could deploy kind of the brains of your operation on one specific chain, i.e. Moonbeam, and then have kind of a standard, you know, messaging protocol or messaging layer that allows you to communicate with other chains. But on those other chains, what you have is kind of almost just like a proxy, and it just does very simple operations. So it'll send tokens or burn tokens or mint NFTs or burn NFTs, but they're very sort of simple atomic operations. All of your business logic, the complicated parts of your application reside in this brain, right? And so that should essentially simplify the deployment. It also would lead to a better user experience because the brain has kind of an awareness of what's happening on all these other chains. And so by connecting a wallet or an interface to the central deployment, you can kind of present like a unified experience and UI to the user. So that's kind of the belief behind Moonbeam, basically. So, yeah.
Taking another step back to, you know, we were talking about those who are involved with this, you know, they believe in a multi-chain future and that interoperability. For you yourself, since entering the crypto space, did your own perspective on things, like, were you always like, okay, this makes sense that it's going to be multi-chain? Or did you ever have, like, did you start out kind of like one project or blockchain drew in your attention and then you expanded your horizon? And a part two to this question, not to add too much to it, but just in general, there are those people out there who are very, if not maximalist, like their chain first very heavily. And how do you think, like, is that a bad thing for this space?
I think it's an unrealistic one. I mean, to answer the first part of your question, I think I always bought into that from the beginning. I mean, just out of, you know, like I said, I'm a little bit older. I've had a lengthy career in technology. I've never seen one technology dominate everything, right? If you think about, I mean, my background was in Java development. And so within sort of mainstream development, you're either one of two things, right? You're either a Java developer or you're a .NET developer. Both of them have their strengths and weaknesses, but I think it's just human nature that you're always going to get somebody, you know, you can have the best technology in the world. You're always going to have somebody who doesn't buy into it, right? And starts doesn't align with the vision, wants to do it differently, gets other people to buy in and so forth. So I've never seen, in all of my career, I've never seen like, hey, there's this one specific technology stack and it's the only thing that everybody uses. It's just not a thing. So I find it, I can't really take Ethereum maximalists seriously because that's just not how human nature works. Like, I mean, I'm not saying Ethereum won't have a lot of success. I think it will and it has. But there's always going to be people saying, well, no, I don't want to be bought into one chain. And like, I want to, this idea that you can have an entire community aligned, everybody aligned around one specific vision, I think is just impossible to pull off for a bunch of human psychology reasons that have nothing to do with technology. And so I think from the beginning, I was like, no, there's no way. There's always going to be like competitors. So yeah. So.
And your path, excuse me, your path has led you to being the director of technical operations at Moonbeam Foundation. But what exactly is Moonbeam Foundation, and what does that actually mean as far as your role in the foundation?
Sure, right. Yeah, I think the title's a little misleading. I mean, I do oversee some aspects of technical operations, but I am mainly, most of what I spend my day-to-day with is I also oversee our business development and grants program. So to get to your question of what is the foundation, I mean, there is this little bit of a complicated thing in crypto where, somebody has to, so part of the value proposition of crypto is this decentralization concept, right? The idea that you don't have a single central authority that controls, the operation of the network. But you can't start it that way, right? Like somebody has to build it. So at some point there is, a company that basically develops the technology and that sort of bootstraps the network and then gradually hands over control to the community. And so that is kind of a little unusual. I would say that it's not something you see typically in like other like enterprise setups or ways of doing business, but it is kind of it's something that's a little bit peculiar to crypto. So the role of the foundation is to be the stewards of that process. I mean, if I and the other people at the foundation do our job properly, we essentially eventually write ourselves out of a job. I mean, that is our mission, is to get to a point where, well, I'll be unemployed, I guess, and looking for something else to do. And so, a lot of, our responsibility is fostering the growth and the adoption of the network, is attracting, the right tooling and infrastructure support to the network, which, if you think about it, I think that's something that's not always appreciated about crypto is like, people talk about the blockchain, but they don't necessarily talk about all the other stuff that goes on top of it, right? I mean, if you just have a blockchain and you don't have a wallet to integrate with, okay, so now how do you trade tokens, right? Or how do you trade NFTs? Those wallets don't magically appear. I mean, somebody has to either build it or go attract it. The same with block explorers. If people want to understand what's happening on the blockchain, these block explorers where you can look at the history and the transactions, aggregate analytics, DEXs, NFT marketplaces, all this kind of stuff. So first of all, so a lot of the role of the foundation has been to attract those type of partners and, convince people that, Moonbeam, is an interesting place to build and to get them to deploy. I think we've done a very good job of that. I think we have a very, we're not sort of blowing our own horn. I think we have sort of all of the major pieces that you would expect to see when you're looking at a mature blockchain. And that was a big part of our focus was when Moonbeam launched was to have a lot of those things in support. Also developer tuning, right? Like developers have these specific tools, Hardhat, Truffle, and others that they use to integrate with. And then the rest of our responsibility is to essentially, attract users, attract transactions, get interesting applications built on top of Moonbeam so that, there's actually interesting things for people to do, whether that's in gaming or decentralized finance or NFT collections or enterprise integrations or real world use cases. And so we have a business development team that will go out and talk to teams and, try and convince them of the benefits and merits of deploying to Moonbeam. We have, various grant programs that we run where, we hand out financial incentives for people to come deploy and then essentially help them like offset their development costs and so forth. So I think that's kind of generally the role of the foundation. So
what are some of the most exciting projects that have been brought on through those through the grants? Moonbeam Ignite, I think it's called.
Yeah, we have this, we are running currently this like Ignite program, which is kind of aimed at stimulating the decentralized finance, ecosystem on Moonbeam. So there are kind of there's a whole bunch, right? So there's the two leading DEXs on Moonbeam, BeamSwap and StellaSwap. So they're both DEXs and automated market makers. BeamSwap has BeamX, which is this decentralized perpetuals exchange. And as well, StellaSwap, they've built Pulsar, which is a kind of a concentrated liquidity AMM. There's Gamma, which is this sort of well-known DeFi protocol. They're not just on Moonbeam; they're on others as well. But they're kind of coming in. They're a market maker with more active management of financials. So they're deploying incentives on top of Beamswap and StelSwap, but also Uniswap v3, which is deployed on Moonbeam. We have liquid staking, so people can do liquid staking of both Glimmer via StelSwap as well as DOT via both StelSwap and Bifrost, which is this other parachain that we've partnered with. So you can kind of see that we're starting to bring this kind of cross-chain vision to the fore. We have a major lending protocol, Moonwell, where you can do lending and borrowing, and then we also have Prime Protocol, which is kind of an interesting one. It's a cross-chain lending protocol, so people can they've integrated with 8 chains, but Moonbeam is kind of the hub for their operations. So you can kind of see how this brain and spoke model or hub and spoke model kind of becomes reality. But basically, you can go deposit funds on any of their chains. And then also people on any of those other 8 chains can essentially do borrowing against that and do borrowing on margin, and all of that kind of flows through the messaging infrastructure that Moonbeam has built with Moonbeam as kind of as the central brain of operations. So that's kind of what we're kind of focused on right now. But I think there is more stuff coming. I mean, I think we're making kind of a major push into gaming. We're having quite a lot of success in attracting teams in Brazil, where I think crypto is really starting to take off because of kind of their specific economic and political situation. We have various kind of real world asset applications that are coming to Moonbeam, with enterprise implementations and so forth. So, we're trying to make sure that we're not just sort of pigeonholed into one specific area, basically, right? We want sort of broad utility for Moonbeam. So,
So I read that Uniswap had recently deployed on Moonbeam. Mm-hmm. What does it mean for one of the most well-known DEXs in the space to come to Moonbeam? Does that bring a lot of attention or users, or is it kind of, even though it's a big name, do they kind of need to restart their user base when they move over here as well? How does that exactly work?
Yeah, I do think that, there is a little bit of this sort of restarting the user base. I mean, they don't magically come with a bunch of users, but I think it is significant, right? I mean, Uniswap is sort of the, it's a known quantity. It's kind of it's the name. I mean, it's like at this point like a trusted brand, right? So people generally feel that that is a good and safe deployment, and they trust it and so forth. And so I think that just counts for a lot, basically. Essentially, I mean, they don't deploy everywhere, right? So I think it is kind of a little bit of a testament to the fact that Moonbeam has is not just one of I mean, there's a lot of blockchains out there, but I don't think all of them have got to the same level of maturity. And I think we're very pleased with the fact that they deployed, and I think it's kind of a little bit of a vote of confidence in the ecosystem, basically. So I think that's just great. I think there was kind of quite a bit of excitement, and I think they've done quite well. So yeah. So.
Nice. Yeah. And I was also looking into rooted liquidity, and I feel like, again, my technical knowledge is somewhat limited, but I feel like it ties into some of the examples of the projects you were just talking about. Can you explain if I'm correct there and how exactly that works?
Yeah, I'll try and explain it. It does get a little bit more technical, but I'll try and keep it as simple as I can. So typically, when you have tokens in crypto, and if you're EVM compatible, you're all following this ERC20 standard, right? So the ERC20 standards kind of describes what operations a token has to support, or a smart contract has to support to be a token. So we've extended that with this standard that we call XC20, which allows a smart contract to be an ERC20, but also work cross-chain. And so specifically taking advantage of Polkadot's underlying kind of messaging infrastructure, and the fact that there is this shared relay chain, which provides kind of like a shared messaging layer and additional security. So by basically, developing a smart contract that's both ERC20 and XC20, it allows people to take liquidity that's been sourced from others. So we essentially, we're attracting liquidity from other chains, from Ethereum, from Polygon, from Binance and so forth, and then routing it through Moonbeam and making it available to all of the other parachains in the Polkadot ecosystem. And so one of the biggest challenges, if you're trying to build if you're trying to launch a blockchain and you want to have a functioning DeFi ecosystem, you need liquidity. I mean, fundamentally, people need to have deposited money, and you need to have assets, and that needs to be deep enough. There needs to be enough of it for people to be able to do operations. Because if you don't, then what happens is if you start doing a trade and there's not, or you want to do borrowing and there's not enough assets in the pool that you're borrowing against, you're going to get some pretty bad pricing, basically, right? You're going to get either very high slippage on your trades or very unpredictable. You might see the token price at, I don't know, right, $14.99, but because there's so little available, by the time you put your order in, suddenly you're paying 2 or 3 times that much. And so it is very difficult for chains to attract liquidity. I mean, when there are so many chains out there, how do you convince people that your chain is the one to deploy on? So being able to kind of take liquidity that has been aggregated on Moonbeam and then spread it to other chains in the Polkadot ecosystem and do it in a way that is very secure, that's highly reliable, that does not rely on these sort of traditional bridges, but also doesn't require users to do manual bridging, which does require kind of like a higher level of understanding of crypto. That's a very attractive proposition. It's an attractive proposition for us because it enhances the use case for Moonbeam and this cross-chain vision that we've been aspiring to. It's attractive for other chains because they can now, more quickly bootstrap essentially financial assets to build, whatever it is that they're building, right? Whether that's gaming or identity or any of the other like crypto use cases. So yeah.
Sicco, what's the purpose of the Glimmer token?
The Glimmer token, it's Moonbeam's native token. So basically it's what pays for gas fees, right? Moonbeam, like any other chain, requires gas for paying for operations. And so that's what the native token's for. Yeah.
And that, excuse me, my throat is, I can't talk today.
Go for it.
But that rooted liquidity, that sounds like a huge problem to be solved. Excuse me. And, that to allow projects to have liquidity from separate chains as they expand, as you mentioned, that's sort of the inevitable point that a project will get to if it's seen success. They reach a certain amount of users within their ecosystem and they need to expand to then continue their growth. Without the routed liquidity, which has been sort of the standard for a long time, is, you launch on a new chain and then it doesn't have the same liquidity you have on your other chain. That all sounds good and well, but what are some of the drawbacks to implementing this? Is it as easy as it sounds? Does it open all doors, or are there costs to the user in terms of like your transactions? If you're now utilizing, if the project's utilizing Moonbeam's technology, is there extra gas fees or complications from maybe a user experience perspective? What are some of the drawbacks? Because we understand all the benefits here.
Yeah. So, I think from the user experience, we've tried to make it as easy as we can. So basically, we're trying to avoid the scenario where people have to, essentially go bridge tokens over from one chain to another and have to kind of go figure out, okay, what bridge is it? What asset is it? What's the asset on one side? What's the asset on the other side? We are building support for this into the Moonbeam dApp. Moonbeam has its own decentralized application, which you can use for governance and staking. And so we're adding support for XVM in there. We believe that, user experience, especially friction around the user experience, is like a major obstacle to crypto. It's still not as easy to use as, kind of like a traditional Web2 banking application. So I think, we very much have that kind of in mind. We very much had that in mind in kind of building this. Are there downsides to it? I think, fundamentally, like, you are kind of working across multiple chains, right? And each chain kind of wants its own operations paid for. So you do have to, yes, if you're bringing liquidity over from Ethereum via Moonbeam and then deploying on Bifrost, like, there is gas operations like along the way. But yeah, I don't know. Like, nobody does anything for free, right? So I think that is kind of the cost of of doing business. I think the reason why I think you don't see a lot of other chains doing this is look, we've been working at this for a long time. It took a lot of development on our side to kind of build it out. You need to be kind of on the right platform for this, and I think kind of have the right mindset and philosophy. And I think our implementation of Polkadot. I mean, this is exactly why we chose Polkadot, right? It was to have this kind of like this kind of vision around interoperability and have the entire technology stack and so forth built around that. So I mean, I don't know if I've kind of properly answered your question, but I think that's kind of my initial reaction or thoughts on it. So yeah.
No, yeah, I think that definitely answered the question. Further to Moonbeam's vision you were just touching on, how does that align with the greater goals of the Polkadot ecosystem? Like, how embedded is Moonbeam with Polkadot?
I think we're pretty embedded. I mean, we're the I hate to say the word number one, but we are by far by both a user volume and transaction volume. I think we are kind of the most the most active parachain out of all of them. I think we kind of very much see ourselves as kind of the gateway to Polkadot, right? So we want to be that logical entry point, and we do have a lot of teams that kind of approach us precisely for that reason. Who are like, hey, we're interested in in working with Polkadot. We already have a deployment on Polygon or Ethereum or one or Solana or one of the other chains, and we're interested in kind of working with Polkadot, and so Moonbeam then becomes kind of like the de facto place where they go, because again we have this vision around interoperability, right? So I think that aligns well with Polkadot's vision as well. I think their vision was always we want to have these highly specialized chains, one chain that does identity, another chain that does credit scores. Okay, now if you build those two together, you kind of have have sort of the basis for say a lending protocol, right? So having a chain that very much kind of shares this belief and then builds technology around that to facilitate it and identifies obstacles and friction points and tries to address those, I think we're pretty well aligned with with Parity on that. So yeah.
One thing you mentioned earlier in the conversation was some of the progress you've seen in the gaming side of things. Can you dive deeper into that, of how gaming is being impacted via Moonbeam?
Yeah, well, just even in general in crypto, I think there's a little bit of a trend. I mean, I've given my own background in gaming and my personal hobbies. It's something I was quite interested in. So I think if you look at kind of gaming historically in crypto, I'd say it's not really gaming, right? I mean, I hate to cast sort of shade on. I know people have worked hard at it and so forth, but I think it is kind of what I would more call DeFi with a thin gaming veneer. I mean, if you think of something like Axie Infinity, I don't know that the game was all that compelling. I think what was very compelling is that people in low wage countries could basically very rapidly make a lot of money. I think that made sense in a specific setting, and with that specific token price, it wasn't really sustainable, right? So, and I think for gaming to be successful, it needs to be a game first. It first needs to be something you want to play. It needs to be something you want to play because it's fun and because you enjoy doing it and so forth. And then if crypto can then either enhance or transform the experience, that then becomes a net positive, right? So, and so I think, we kind of very much that's very much my belief. I think a lot of people at Foundation that kind of view it that way as well. So what we're seeing now is that there's sort of this trend where a lot of these sort of early crypto games have kind of, they've kind of failed in a way, right? Or they've floundered. And now what's happening is the more serious games are coming. So there is a lot of interest now from Web2 studios. Not necessarily the big players. I mean, if you're an Activision or Electronic Arts or Ubisoft, I mean, you kind of have, you have your business model. You're making lots of money. I mean, they don't really have much of a need for experimenting or innovating, and in fact, it is a bit of a risk for them because gamers do have traditional gamers have a little bit of this negative association with you say NFT or blockchain. What they're hearing is, you want to extract more money from me for less gameplay, right? So, but I think the indie studios they're a lot more willing to experiment. I think even just, forget crypto for a second. Most of the really innovative gameplay is coming from like smaller studios. I mean, if you look at things like Fortnite or PUBG or Valheim, or there's all games that are kind of more experimenting with the formula of the game itself, and so they're like just more naturally inclined to kind of look at crypto as something that could like enhance or change the player experience. And so we're seeing a lot of interest from there. In terms of on Moonbeam, we have a number of like crypto games that have been deployed there. I think we've definitely been like doing stuff to kind of support them and grow their activity. I was kind of heavily involved in this. We have this Lunar Gaming Festival that we're running to kind of promote the games on Moonbeam and kind of entice players who play one game to maybe like check out the other ones and kind of get this kind of cross-pollination going. But we have been talking to like some larger studios. I mean, I can't really say much yet because I don't want to kind of preempt their release. But like there is sort of like some games that I think are more kind of like a AAA standards that are coming that you'll be able to play on PlayStation and Steam and Xbox and so forth. And that will be using Moonbeam for sort of they don't call it NFTs, they call it digital collectibles, but essentially that is what it is. We also have kind of a launcher that's being built and that'll deploy on Moonbeam, and so yeah, I'm quite excited about things that where I think people will actually really enjoy playing the games, kind of having those come to Moonbeam and kind of like further that use case. So yeah.
As a gamer myself, I get excited when I think about what crypto and blockchain tech can do for the gaming space. But it does have such a negative perception from most gamers in the space, and rightfully so in a lot of ways. NFTs have been a source of so many scams, crypto in general. If you're not familiar, and that might have been your only experience with crypto or all you've heard about it. And then you also mentioned sort of the other problem, or the way that a lot of crypto games have been built today, which is combining this sort of play to earn, DeFi aspect to it. And the thing is, when you start mixing finance and gaming, you kind of remove the game aspect, the for fun, the play for fun, and you're now just playing for money, at which point you could either call it gambling or you could just call it like putting in work to earn money. And it's not really what gaming's all about. So there's a real challenge there in providing real use cases that work in gaming. And the one that people always talk about is like the common scenario or use case that I think everybody just like clicks with is like, let's say skins and items. So you're playing a game and you buy your skin, and that is in the form of an NFT. And now when you leave the game or you decide you don't want to play it anymore, or maybe for the aspect of finance, you could choose to sell it on a secondary marketplace, or maybe you can even take it to another game and it's a different skin or item there, whatever the point. That all sounds good and well, but the clear challenges there are, again, the finance side. If I own it, if I have full ownership to do what I want with it, and I can sell it, at what point do I just change what, even if it was a really fun game, let's say we're taking like Fortnite and I am playing it for fun, but then they implement this. Do I stop playing it for fun and I start playing it potentially to just earn skins to go sell? And does that ruin the game? And do skins become overly expensive and now everybody leaves because they're like, so how do we overcome those challenges? And what are your thoughts?
This is a topic I get very excited about because I agree with you that I think I see those same challenges. And I think there's a lot of people in crypto that are kind of some point engaged with gaming, but don't necessarily have like a gamer DNA. And so are now sort of like discovering these problems that, like, I mean, if you're a World of Warcraft player, the type of stuff that you're describing where, what is the impact on the in-game economy and to what extent does it destroy, can it destroy player enjoyment of the game and become a barrier to like attracting new players? Those are very familiar problems to anybody who's been like in sort of like, MMOs for like a long time. So I think there is like a little bit of narrow-minded thinking about this kind of stuff. I think, I'm hopeful that I think there's a way more exciting stuff you could do with crypto that could really enhance the game experience, and I'm hopeful that there are studios that are going to be kind of latching onto this. So the way that I kind of think about it, when you ask yourself what can crypto do for gaming, so the way that I look at it is if I look at myself, right? Game is like a form of escape, right? It's a way to get away from the daily grind and to go live a fantasy life, right? And it's a form of escape, but people also want it to, and so it's a form of escape. It's also a way to meet people and have kind of these social experiences. But you also want it to kind of mean something, right? And so I think there are ways that crypto could like kind of enhance the immersion. So like one way that I kind of think about it, which I haven't seen many people do, but I'm hopeful that it's coming, is so I don't know if you've ever played The Division. The Division was these two games, Division 1 and Division 2, developed by Activision, which was set in New York after kind of a global pandemic. It was before COVID, so I think they were a little bit prophetic. But in The Division, you go through these different districts of New York City, and there are these specific areas that are called dark zones, where the best loot in the game drops, but with a twist. So you go in there, you kill a boss, you kill a monster. Well, I mean, they're guys with guns basically, but you kill an NPC. They drop this really good, high quality weapon. But before it becomes yours, you have to extract it, right? And in order to extract it, you got to go to this extraction point. You shoot up a flare, and then that brings in a helicopter, and the helicopter takes 3 minutes to get there. And while the flare's in the air, everybody sees that you're there basically, and you become a target. And if somebody else kills you, the items that you looted in the dark zone, they're now theirs, right? Well, so that provides an additional level of tension because now you're playing for real, right? So imagine that you had something like that, but with an underlying asset that also has a monetary value. I think that kind of really kind of enhances kind of the gamer's immersion. Now, to your point, what happens when essentially the money-making aspect starts to take over? And I think studios often think about this the wrong way, where they're like, they're kind of, in a way you could kind of look at it as like, what happens when the griefers show up, right? How do we prevent that? How do we prevent losing control of a game? There's this sort of need from the game studio to try and kind of really tightly manage the gamer's experience. And I think that's exactly why you get into this kind of trouble. I think you need to almost start with the outset of, that's going to happen. It's unavoidable, but we should like loop it into the gameplay where, it's kind of clear to everybody how it works, what the mechanics are, what the rule set is, and where it actually becomes like a major focal point of the game and where it makes it fun. And to me, the absolute best example of this is EVE Online. EVE Online is this game that, it's this MMO that's been in existence for, 15 or 20 years, where people built these, together with other people, built these galactic empires and essentially waged trade wars, right? And also like lure each other into ambushes. And the best stories that come out of EVE Online is where like some guild lured another corporation into an ambush and blew up $150,000 worth of ships. And then the rest of the community came together and then like went after that corporation. And so I think, another untapped area for gaming is like on-chain governance of the game itself. I think that could be kind of the counterbalance. In any game that I've played that has some sort of competitive component, if you go to the forums of that game, the number one thing you hear is the game's not balanced, the developers don't understand their own gameplay. I mean, go look at the World of Warcraft forums, right? Or go look at Diablo. There was this whole controversy in Diablo 4 several months ago about how some of the rebalancing that they did. And invariably, the community always thinks, rightly or wrongly, that they know better than the developers. And Unity's like, oh, if only the community could directly control. I'm like, that is kind of what crypto and decentralization are built for. Imagine if you had the rule set of the game or some aspects of the game world up for like a governance vote. And so when what you describes happens, where the economics become so twisted in a way or distorted that it benefits the very few and the vast majority can no longer essentially enjoy, well, what if you could then have a governance vote to change how some of it worked? Maybe there's a tax. Maybe you've outlawed certain types of transactions or trades. I think that would create like a greater sense of enjoyment. The last thing I'll say on it is, I have talked to studios about this, and they're always like kind of the reactions like, well, but giving over governance to the players and like, that sounds great, but like what happens when the griefers show up? And I can say, you almost have to assume that, don't see that as like an inevitable or something that you're trying to avoid. It's an inevitability. And I think you want to kind of build the game where the griefers become part of the story, right? I watched this great podcast by this guy who built, they made this indie game on Steam called Realm of the Mad God. And, you know, it's interesting, right? If you're building a game studio, you have a basic problem. Like, building a game, developing the software, it's a capital intensive endeavor. It costs a lot of money to build. Gamers can consume the content faster than you can churn it out, which is why when you look at games like World of Warcraft or Diablo, it's, you know, new expansion launches, everybody's excited. 2-3 months in, people get, you know, they've done the content, it becomes a grind. That's when the complaining starts, right? And so there is this never ending race of, can we keep pumping out enough content so that people can stay in this gaming amusement park, or before we lose our customer base. And this guy from Realm of the Mad God had a completely different way of thinking about it. He's like, you know, what if you didn't have to do that? What if the gamers created their own content? And so with Realm of the Mad God, what they did is they created this kind of sandbox experience where absolutely anything went. Okay. And so what happens is, in the beginning, yes, all the griefers show up and they start doing all this like negative behavior. They start, you know, you have these like robber guilds that go around and they start like robbing the innocent citizens of the world. You have people that start like acting as robber barons and setting up like tolls on specific roads. But humans self-organize, right? So what happens is other players kind of band together. So now people start forming militias and they start forming a town guard. And, you know, there's like somebody gets elected to like lead an army to go like wipe out the robber barons. And before you know it, that drama, right? That tension between players, that becomes the story and it becomes the content. And suddenly you don't have, from a studio's perspective, you don't have to build anything new because it just keeps going on perpetually. And so I think, you know, I know these are all kind of a little bit lofty and idealistic goals, but I think eventually somebody's going to figure out the right kind of balance between, you know, having a system where you are kind of competing over things that have some sort of monetary value, which in a way enhances your engagement. It enhances your immersion because now you're not just playing for abstract points. You're playing for something that also means something in the real world. And then also keeps the community involved and fosters these sort of competitive narratives. And I think, you know, if you think about, you know, if you can frame it in such a way, if you think of, you know, Star Wars, right? The most common trope, you know, the small, plucky band of rebels against this overarching, you know, evil, you know, oppressive empire. If you can capture that kind of spirit in a game and have governance involved and you know, playing for realsies, basically, I think that is where I think you could potentially have something that really transforms an experience. And then I think that's the game that does that, right? That's the game that brings, you know, the next 10 or 20 million like gamers over from traditional gaming, because now suddenly this crypto game is offering something that you can't get in like traditional gaming. You know what I mean? So yeah. That's kind of my hope and my faith and my belief that
I'm
that
glad
will
I asked the
eventually see
question.
that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Sicco, this is also so interesting. And further to that, one, not to go too long down the gaming rabbit hole, but it's interesting because we had a guest on a few weeks ago that put something in my mind that I hadn't thought about, because going back to 2020, when I first started to hear about the term NFT, I remember one of the first use cases back then, people are talking about what these could do in the future. And Ulf brought it up earlier with the skins example of, you know, you have an asset in a game and then you own that and you can bring it into a different game. Maybe it has a different functionality, but this should be obvious, but it was something I hadn't thought about that was brought to my attention. And that was that it's really hard, probably, like developing a game is so challenging. They all use their different engines. There's whole different things that it's not easy to be able to do that from a technical standpoint. Yep. I mean, just from your perspective, do you agree with that? I mean, is that even a realistic thing that could happen in the future?
I think, you know, there's the technical side. I think there's even the incentive side. I mean, if you think about it, okay, so if I'm playing, you know, again, I'm going to go to the World of Warcraft example, right? So let's say World of Warcraft was like a crypto game, and like the assets that were dropping, the weapons, the armor that was dropping in game, or even the cosmetics, were NFTs, right? Question is like, so the value proposition is like true ownership of your asset, right? So if you don't like what Blizzard is doing with World of Warcraft, or they decide to turn the servers off, you still own this NFT. But do you really? I mean, there's a little bit, the problem is like that for the item to be valuable, it has to have some utility. Now, you could, of course, argue that there's a collector value, right? If you were like the first of 200 to get Ashbringer, which was this weapon, yes, there's bragging rights, right? So even after the game has died, okay, I could put this on my profile. But, listen, I'm 49 years old. I've played games that most people that are in their 20s have never heard of, right? So I don't know that at some point I think that bragging value diminishes as well. I think for it to really have value, it has to have cross-game utility. But what's the incentive for the studio to do that? Why would they? I'm Studio A, I've developed my game. You're Studio B, you've developed your game. Why would I offer support for your game? It's kind of difficult. You could for assets in your game. You could maybe a sort of like maybe I'm vampire attacking or stealing like your gamers. That's possible. I think you need like a neutral third party. I think you will eventually see the rise of things similar to like the PlayStation Network or the Xbox Network, where they're going to kind of facilitate those type of interactions, where they'll basically say, okay, we have this collection. We have a collection of items, of swords, of guns, of weapons, of cosmetics, and in order to be listed on our network, or maybe there's some sort of financial reward, you need to, the game needs to offer support for these like standardized collections. And so that essentially there's almost like a neutral third party that acts as like a match, both as a matchmaker. Because the one thing I can tell you, what I have seen in like crypto, like one specific challenge is that it is highly decentralized. And there is, it is very interesting sitting at the foundation is that, we have all these teams, we obviously reach out to teams, team come talk to us, they come ask for support either from a marketing or a DevRel or a financial side. And, it's interesting, like I'll have calls where, I'm like, this team has a great technical idea, but they're kind of lacking the business vision to execute that. That team is kind of more or less thinking along the same route. They have the business vision, but they're lacking the technical expertise. It'd be great if you could somehow connect them together, right? So, and so I think, we're trying to do some of that. I think there is, specifically within gaming, I definitely think there's an opportunity for kind of almost like a third-party matchmaker. And I think it would be like a launcher or like something like Steam or the PlayStation Network and so forth, that knows all of these games and they can go say, hey, you have a sci-fi game, you have a sci-fi game. Why don't you both implement support for this like laser rifle? And then we'll help like promote that with like a co-marketing campaign so that people that are playing like game A can also go like gaming to can go try out game B. I think, decentralization, it's interesting, right? Like I think decentralization can work, but I think, you do still need like cooperation. Like decentralization does not mean like no cooperation, right? Or no partnerships or collaboration. And I think, you're going to have to get some teams that like are more willing to play matchmakers to kind of like deliver on that vision basically. So, yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Sicco, we're coming close to the end of this conversation, and in a second, we're going to ask you 3 questions, which we ask every single guest of Show Me the Crypto. But just before that, one thing that we haven't touched on, and maybe it's a harsh transition in a different subject, but there's Moonbeam, but then there's also Moonriver. Mm-hmm. What's the difference there? My understanding is basically on Kusama, but can you quickly kind of break that down?
Yeah, no, for sure. So Polkadot, so there's Polkadot and there's Kusama. Kusama is like the canary or the test network for Polkadot. So the idea being that, you have a test environment where you deploy not just your code, but we're also able to test in advance, like kind of the economic impact of it, right? So Kusama has like, it has tokens. Those tokens have a value. If you're implementing, a specific, say governance proposal or something like this, and you want to kind of make sure that like the economics of it makes sense and work, that's where you go test it. So we've taken that approach with Moonriver. It is the network for Moonbeam. So, we deploy, like I mentioned, we've done something like over 20 upgrades over the first 2 years of Moonbeam's existence. All of those get deployed to Moonriver first, and there are applications deployed there. And so people get a chance to test them out there, like make sure that they work economically and so forth before they then get deployed to Moonbeam. So yeah.
Makes sense. Perfect. Well, as I mentioned, we have 3 questions that we ask every single guest. It's a segment we call You Had Me at Crypto. Ulf is going to ask you those questions.
Go for it.
All right, Sicco. The first question. Who is your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
That's a good question. I'd have to go with Gavin from Polkadot for sure. Like, I mean, I think, because we're so heavily embedded in Polkadot, I think, we want to, kind of stay up to date with kind of what the vision is there and what new stuff is coming, because it directly impacts us, right? So that's definitely something I keep an eye out for his announcements. So.
Nice. Second question, what will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from now?
Oh boy.
Not financial advice.
That's a tough one. Yeah, not financial advice. Yeah, I don't know. I'd say probably something like 10x what it is now. So it's like what, $35,000? So let's go with 350. Yeah.
350?
Solid answer.
All right. I like it. Third question, what is the most underrated project in all of crypto?
Other than Moonbeam.
That's a good question. I guess not one deployed on Moonbeam then either, right? Like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I would call out like one specific project, but I think I still think gaming is like as a use case is like heavily underrated. I mean, for many of the reasons that I've talked about, I think there is way more that people can do with it. I am very excited about, there is this like next wave coming. I think some games lend itself better to it than others, right? Collectible card trading games, hybrid strategy games with collectible card trading games. But I think, there are like a whole bunch that are getting deployed and developed, and I think we'll see a lot more uptake of that over the next couple of years. So yeah.
Sicco, despite the fact that you have this just incredible technical background, you also have the ability, perhaps it's the journalist coming out in you, where you're able to explain these things in a very easy to understand way. Thank you so much for joining Ulf and I on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Oh, thank you, Wade and Ulf. It was really great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.